Hi, everyone, and welcome to the latest in our series on tips on dealing with isolation from the professionals. I'm here today with Aaron Linsdau, polar explorer, to talk about his experiences and his guidance and tips for us. So, Aaron, to start, can you just introduce yourself, please?
Sure, my name's Aaron Linsdau. I'm a polar explorer. I've got the world record for the longest solo expedition to the South Pole. Spent months and months alone in isolation. We'll talk about that in this interview a little bit and give you the experience of what it's all about.
Great, thanks, Aaron. So, what's the hardest thing you've ever done?
The hardest thing I've ever done as an explorer and adventurer is skiing solo to the South Pole. I spent nearly 3 months alone in Antarctica, dragging a couple sleds that weighed about 160, 170 kilos,
Wow.
all the way from the coast of Antarctica to the South Pole with headwinds that were 60, 70, 80 kilometers an hour, minus 40-degree temperatures. I mean, it sounds like something right out of a bad B movie, honestly, but that was the toughest thing I've ever done. I've also been in Greenland and the Arctic solo trekking there as well in severe storms. So it's a quite an ordeal that I tend to put myself through.
I read that some of your food spoiled early on, so quite a few things went wrong early on. So it sounded pretty gruesome.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I took a lot of butter. I took about 35 kilos of butter as a food supply. But
Ah,
interestingly, the conditions in Antarctica, even though it's minus 40 degrees Celsius, the solar radiation warmed things up and made food go bad. It was really like being in space. It's kind of peculiar.
oh wow. Oh, well, I won't preempt the other question. So, the next one is, what's the longest period you've spent in isolation, and how did you cope?
Sure. The longest period I've spent in isolation is 81 days solo,
Wow.
going from the coast of Antarctica to the South Pole. My full expedition plan was 3 months straight, so I came real close to that sort of time. And I was out there cooking by myself, dragging this huge amounts of sleds in super tough weather. Eventually, my mind started making visions up of colors in the snow. I started seeing birds in the sky, but I
Oh
had to
wow.
focus on knowing that my brain was just making these things up to fill what's called the sensory deprivation gap. And that's something you really have to manage because at home it's not really a problem, but the mind just falls apart. I lost, I think it was about 13 kilos of weight over those 3 months dragging
Wow.
those supplies. So, I mean, off this frame, it's quite a dramatic loss there.
So those hallucinations, were they from the nutrition, were they, or lack of nutrition?
No, actually, my nutrition was fine. I kept a very balanced diet as much as I can with polar food, but really just seeing constant solid white or just white and blue, your brain actually starts to make things up to fill that gap. Plus, just the physical exertion was so extreme. I mean, I actually ended up coughing up blood because
Oh
I
wow.
got a lung infection. Talking about this thing that's going right around right now. So it was very aware of the impact of being alone and becoming very ill. I was lucky to have made it.
How do you solve, or how do you diagnose when you're there on your own in isolation as well with something like that?
So I had a communication where I had a satellite phone back to the base camp
Mm.
talking with doctors, and I knew I'd gotten a cold, but I didn't realize it converted to a lung infection. So I brought some antibiotics with me and just started taking them. Unfortunately, it killed the infection, but the impact of that, having
Mm.
that sort of infection, it wiped me out for a good month. So my original plan on my expedition didn't quite work out. So I just simply headed for the pole and had a good time of it.
Wow. Um, okay, so top three tips on dealing with isolation, please.
Sure. The top three tips I have is the ABC system. The first is managing your attitude through any difficult circumstance, especially when you're living in isolation, because it's so easy to start focusing on the news and your phone. And it's really just like it will rot your mind
Mm,
out super quick. So when
definitely.
you're starting to get those negative feelings and getting twisted, you have to back up and say, wait a minute, what's my attitude about this circumstance? Is being angry and grinding my teeth really going to help me out? Or do I need to do something positive? The second part is the buddy system and eat your butter, just like this. I actually eat butter on stage as a motivational speaker, and just to show that's the truth that sometimes maybe you have to be in quarantine, maybe conditions aren't enjoyable, but you really have to eat your stick of butter, whatever it might be.
I'm not going to
in
be joining
order-
you on that just yet, but yeah.
Yeah, sorry for eating on camera here, but sometimes you have to do that, and maybe have a buddy system of where you have to have a mask. It's not unpleasant. Maybe you have to wear a parka and put on a mask and do all these things. So you have to focus on what's my butter that I have to eat. And the third thing is complacency in the ABC system of it's very easy just to lay around and start feeling sorry for yourself, letting your physical body deteriorate. But the more you do that, the worse you feel. Now, of course, you don't want to keep eating butter, but that complacency can really wipe you out. So regardless of what you're doing, I'll show you that the mask and everything I had to wear every day. I couldn't be complacent about it. I had to eat my butter to keep everything going, because without these things, I would have frozen my face off. So this is literally what I would look like every day. Kind of be a Darth Vader thing. So managing the attitude, the buddy and the butter system, and keeping complacency away is critical to managing yourself through a period of isolation where you can come out without too many difficulties. Because people in extreme isolation can mentally fall apart. It's actually very common. The most effective punishment for humans, other than death, of course, is solitary confinement. So as humans, we're naturally social. So when you force somebody into solitary confinement, your mind can really twist up. So you've got to remember attitude, pay attention to whatever butter you have to consume, and don't become complacent about your body, your mind, and your situation.
They're fantastic, highly relevant. The attitude one in particular, I think, definitely that would help a lot of people. And lastly, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Sure. People, I know this is a super tough situation. Ideally, nobody's ever isolated in this sort of circumstance. Is really tough on people. And the whole theory is that we're supposed to stay healthy and stay away. I know there's a lot of debate on that, but the key is to remember, manage your attitude and be careful about your situation, because once things go really sideways and you lose your health, everything else won't matter to you.
No, fantastic. And what's next on the agenda then? What events? What have you got coming up?
Well, originally I had a solo expedition across Greenland planned, but of course that went away. I was planning to go climb Denali in Alaska. That went away. So I'm working on a book. I mean, I finished my Antarctic Tears book quite a few years ago, but I'm also working on a hiking guide for Jackson Hole. And also in 2024, there's a total eclipse that's going to cross the United States. And I'm working on books for that too, to ramp up to, okay, what am I working on next? And we'll see what happens with travel restrictions.
Okay. Hey, it's been fantastic talking to you. Really, really good points, really relevant. I've really enjoyed it. And thanks again for your time, Aaron.
Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate having me on.